Now, both renin and gastric lipase, again, very important for newborns because they're on an all-milk diet. It helps them to be efficient and they can break down the fats and the proteins in the milk and be successful. By the time you're an adult, since renin is no longer viable, gastric lipase is pretty much useless because of the acidity levels, you're not going to be able to be very efficient at breaking down milk products. So if you went on the all-milk diet like your baby, you would starve to death. And this is what happens to small babies. So unfortunately, there have been cases in the past where somebody goes back and for religious purposes, who the hell knows why, people be crazy, but they go back on all breast milk and their baby ends up having malnutrition, their baby could die. And they're like, I don't understand, it's breast milk, it's great for them. It's like, yeah, once they start eating solid food, the acidity level of the stomach is going to change. So you can't go back once you've started that solid food. So if your kid is 6 months old and you've started introducing solids, you've already become too acidic to just go back on milk 24/7. So at that point on, that's why the milk doesn't hold them anymore. So if you've had small kids, you might notice, oh, give them a bottle, they're fine while they're babies. But when they're a little bit older, 6 months, 9 months, you give them a bottle and they're still hungry. You're like, but it's the same stuff. They can't process it the same anymore. So they can't get all the nutrients they can from it. So they're still hungry. You just made that milk a beverage versus a meal for those kids. And this is why we can't go back to this type of diet whenever you're an adult. And that's because we are the only mammals that still drink milk after we're weaned. Okay, so even though we always talk about cats drinking milk, really, have you ever seen a cat milking a cow out in the field? No, you don't see that happening. So all of your mammals wean, and then they never go back to the milk diet. So they don't need those enzymes to process milk. For us, we realize that milk is delicious, and then you can make good stuff like cheese and ice cream out of it. Okay? So we continue to eat milk throughout our lifetime. So even though we like it, we're not as efficient at getting nutrients from it as we once were. Now, renin is also important in cheese making. Okay, so this is how they used to start the cheese making process back in the day. They would add renin to milk, and that's going to separate the curds and the whey. The curds, that's that casein after it's broken down. We break down casein, releasing whey. The curds are gathered to form cheese. Okay, so that's going to be the first step to make cottage cheese, and then every cheese after that just continues to add bacteria or flavor or what have you to make it whatever cheese product you end up doing. The whey in milk processing gets dried up and sold to health food stores for people to put back in their smoothies if you want to charge them extra money. That's where whey protein comes from. It's from the milk producing and the cheese producing types of industries. Now, today we use synthetic renin because it's safer. Back in the day when they had to use real renin, they would harvest it from the linings of either sheep or cow stomachs after they butchered them while they're still babies. Okay, so if you have all natural cheeses, I'm always curious about if Chardonnay uses all natural renin. Things like, oh, whose sheep are you butchering? But again, they would only get that from scraping stomachs from young calves or young sheep. Okay, for GMOs. Well, at least you don't have to have, sheep stomach added to the cheese nowadays to start things up. All right, so whenever we're digesting, we have phases in which the stomach is going to churn and mix and produce their gastric secretions. The first phase of gastric functionality is called the cephalic phase. And this is related to anything that is a reflex that is initiated by the receptors in the head. So this can be thinking of food, this can be smelling food, this could be chewing food, looking at food. Anytime before the food is in the stomach, you are in the cephalic phase. Now, the cerebral cortex and the hypothalamus are going to coordinate this. Again, the cerebral cortex, because you're aware of looking at food or consciously aware of smelling the food, that kind of stuff. And again, the hypothalamus tells you when you're hungry. And whenever you are hungry, and hopefully you go to eat, then it's also going to tell your stomach to produce gastric secretions, because we don't want the food to enter empty, dry stomach. We want it to enter into a stomach that's already ready to churn, already filled with fluid. Similar to pre-filling your washer back in the day before they had energy efficient washers, and you could fill them up and have the stuff ready for the laundry to go into. Remember that back in the day? Mm-hmm. So back in the day, before we cared about power and crap like that, a lot of times you'd fill the washer up and let your clothing soak in fluid to help them, get clean or something crazy. Mm-hmm. Huh? Oh God, you don't soak them for that long. They're like 10 minutes soaked. It's not gonna marinate overnight or anything like that. This is also why a lot of times they complain about how come my whites never get white? You don't pre-soak them. Okay? You got to do that to get a lot of that dirt out of them. And unfortunately, with today's washers and dryers, you can't soak anything because they never fill properly, right? So, why don't they clean properly? Because of the way our machines are built. Then they can sell you products for whitening. It's a ploy. But anywho, we don't want it just to sit there in dryness. We want it to be mixed thoroughly with fluids as soon as it comes in. So we want to have some gastric secretions there. So that's going to be about 1/3 of gastric fill is due to the cephalic phase. And of course, they're going to send these impulses, the hypothalamus, the cerebrum, through the medulla to the vagus nerve. Again, the vagus nerve is then going to send off little signals to those chief cells and those parietal cells, so they start making that gastric secretion. We're also going to go to the smooth muscle so we can start churning. So again, if you're thinking about food or smelling food, sometimes your tummy starts rumbling even before it gets in your body. That's the cephalic phase. So there it is, getting all excited, food's coming. So again, the vagus is going to say, hey, make some pepsinogen, make some hydrochloric acid. It's also going to secrete mucus so nobody burns itself while it's, moving and churning and stuff like that. And of course, we're going to send signals to the skeleton, or the smooth muscle to start contractions. This is also going to help stimulate the G cells. Those are going to produce gastrin, which is a hormone to keep everything going. This is a hormone produced by the stomach. And that's how they got the name G cells. It's not because they're original OGs, it's because they make gastrin. Gastric phase. Once food has entered the stomach, now we are in the gastric phase. So 2/3 of gastric secretion is going to be released during this. So 1/3 during cephalic phase, 2/3 during our gastric phase. And at this point, since we have food in the stomach, we're sending signals back up to the brain confirming, yes, we have consumed, yes, we are eating. So you need to get full force in the digestive process. So lots of juices, lots of moving and so forth. So we're going to have sensory receptors that are going to respond by one, stretching. So as we stretch, those baroreceptors are going to send signals up to the brain saying, hey, I'm stretched. That means food is here. We're also going to have hormonal feedbacks with gastrin to keep things going. We're also going to have the presence of those broken down particles, those proteins, to confirm that food is present. So all these stimuli, again, the stretching, distension, the peptides for protein digestion, the low acidity from all that is a confirmation that, yes, food is present. So we're in that positive feedback mechanism. The more food, the more protein, the more acidity, the more churning. We just keep building and building and building. So all those stimuli, again, cause that hormone gastrin to be released. And gastrin is going to increase enzymatic release and hydrochloric acid release. It's going to increase stomach motility. So everything is building and building to maximum churning, maximum fluid production at this point. So both the cephalic and the gastric phase respond positive feedback mechanisms. So we're just building more and more and more. And again, that protein confirms that food is present. This is why in order to feel full, you have to have a complete snack. So they often talk about that, especially if you do little snack packs. They got meat, they got cheese. The protein lets your stomach know you have food. The fat and the sugar let your intestines know you have food. So if you have food that is missing one of those components, you won't feel completely satisfied with your meal. It's kind of like you can eat a whole bag of Skittles. Yes, you've just consumed a whole bag of calories, but Skittles are fat-free. They're all sugar, which is why you don't feel full after eating Skittles. Okay? It's why you don't feel full after drinking a Coke. They don't have the protein to let your stomach know that food was present. So even though we are eating something, it's almost like it doesn't exist for the stomach. So we never have that full feeling. And this is why they started adding protein to water. So you'll see, the different smart waters and the healthy waters that, it has added protein. They try to make it sound like it's hyping up your health. The reason why they added protein through the water is so you could feel full. So by having protein, it tricks your stomach into eating or to think that you've been eating. So if you've just been drinking water that has some fake sugar in it, so it has taste but no calories and has some protein in it, you're going to feel full longer. So that's how that water helps you lose weight. It's because it's tricking your stomach to that there's the presence of food, even though there's not the presence of food. So you do have to have a protein for your stomach to feel full. So there's our, whatever we're eating, increasing our activity, more and more mixing, more and more production from the mucus and the chief cells and the parietal cells and the G cells, all continuing to increase activity levels. And again, those protein breakdowns are what's going to help trigger the gastrin release. All these are keeping everybody going. So as we're mixing and churning and mixing and churning, again, the exit port for the stomach is that pyloric sphincter. Now, the pyloric sphincter is not watertight, okay? So it's going to close as deep as it can, but it still allows a little bit of leakage. So as we're churning and mixing, you're going to have some of that gastric content start feeding into the duodenum, the small intestines. And as we hit the walls of that small intestines, it has receptors for sugar, it has receptors for fats. And when it starts to see there's fat coming and there's sugar coming, then it's like, oh my gosh, the stomach is about to dump its load. We need to tell it to slow. Okay, so slow the roll down. So it's going to send a negative feedback loop. So the cephalic and the gastric are all positive feedback, keep building and building and building. The intestinal phase, we want to slow the emptying down. And again, this is why having a sugar and fat's important, because the protein lets the stomach know it did something. It was eating, there's food present. The intestinal phase slows the emptying of the stomach, so it won't empty within a few minutes. It's going to take upwards of 4 hours. And of course, the longer the food is sitting in the stomach, other than mixing and churning and processing, it also helps you to feel full longer. So by having a snack that has a protein, a carb, and a lipid associated, like a cube of cheese or some peanut butter or whatever you choose to eat, it's going to help the whole system feel happy and sated as far as hunger is concerned. Okay, so that's why if you eat just the empty calories, whether they're just empty sugars or something, you still feel it's like you're missing something, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of like the high rice dinners, right? You go to Chinese food, that's the biggest joke. 30 minutes later, you're hungry again. And that's because depending on what kind of rice you had, if you just have regular healthy steamed rice, it's just carbs. Your stomach doesn't know it ate anything. Your intestines isn't getting that confirmation other than the sugar presence. So that's why you feel hungry so quickly after. Now, if you're eating Chinese food and more than just rice, it's fried rice, so there's some proteins there, and you're eating a protein with it like a chicken or something, then you feel full a little bit longer. But just rice alone, it instantly fills because it's physically filling the stomach, but you don't have that full feeling for very long because you don't have that feedback from the stomach saying, yeah, I ate something. You were just filled with rice. So you're empty inside. So you got to have everybody on board for you to feel like you've eaten something. So during this time, we want to slow down the motility, the exit of chyme coming from the stomach into the small intestines, because we don't want to overload. The stomach can stretch to deal with that food. The duodenum, the rest of the digestive system, small intestine, large intestine, can't. So if the entire contents of the stomach dump directly into the small intestine too quickly, it would over-distend it. It could pop it in the popping small intestines is kind of fatal. So we want to slow things down to seep it through the system. And that's going to help us, again, not only feel full longer, but give us plenty of time to continue to digest, continue to work on those things so we can absorb as much nutrients as possible. The slower the stomach empties, the more efficient we're going to be at digesting and absorbing those nutrients. So when the chyme-containing fatty acids and glucose leaves the stomach, enters the small intestines, it's going to trigger our endocrine cells. So again, entero are going to be the inside cells of the digestive system, endocrine hormones. So we're going to be releasing a big 3 hormone, gastric inhibitory peptide, our notorious GIP, secretin that stops you from secretin, and then cholecytokinin, CCK. So we've got all 3 of those going. Huh?
Did you just rap?
Kind of, almost. About as coherent as some of them, huh? All right, so again, gastric inhibitory peptide inhibits both gastric secretion and gastric motility, hence the name. Secretin mainly decreases gastric secretions. Ironically, this is the first hormone ever discovered. Okay, you would think it'd be something flashy like testosterone, but nope, it was this little guy. And it's because somebody got drunk at a bar. Isn't that how it always starts? Okay. So back in the day, 1800s, there up in Canada, there was a fur trapper who liked to drink and mouth off, apparently, and he got shot in the stomach. He survived the shot, and he ended up with a hole in his stomach. And a doctor was like, if you let me play with that hole, I'll pay you beer and food. And the guy was like, all right, because what else you going to do is Canada. So that doctor started manipulating it. He would, give the guy food and watch the stomach do its thing. He would put food and have the guy swallow it and then take it out of the stomach to see what the stomach would do. He'd put food directly into the stomach, bypassing the face. He constantly took samples. And this is how we know so much about gastric activities and hormones and phases, because this doctor played with this hole in this guy's stomach for quite a long time. The ironic thing is the doctor died before the guy did, and the guy went on to live like 10 more years, be like, hey, you want to see my hole and you can give me alcohol? And I'm sure it was weird. He's like, no, my tummy. And so he ended up dying as a drunk on the side of the road kind of thing. We still do experiments like this, just not with drunk people because it's kind of illegal. We have cows for that. And you can Google that. In certain veterinarian schools, there's cows that have little ports, and they look like the little port windows in a boat. They'll open them up, and they'll take contents out of the different stomachs the cows have, that kind of stuff. This is how we figure out how cows digest, what's the best feed for cattle, that kind of scenario. So you'll still see them actively used in agriculture and veterinary schools to help understand the functionality of digestion for cattle or any kind of ruminant. So it's something that still lurks, but it all started with the weirdo that got shot in the bar and survived it. So that's how we know all the stuff we know about what's going on with the stomach and its phases. Colocytic is going to inhibit stomach emptying. Now, these three are also going to play a role in intestinal function as well. So we'll revisit those guys in the small intestines. So they're released by the small intestines, and they are going to affect stomach functionality and the other components of the digestive functionality. So here's the intestinal phase where we pump the brakes. So this one is the negative feedback. Notice all the arrows are now blue instead of the yellow, the red and exciting. So CCK, GIP, secretin are all going to slow down the activity of chief cells and parietal cells. We're going to slow down peristalsis. So it's going to decrease the content, decrease the emptying of that stomach. So we can slowly exit out. So again, without the protein, you won't know you have food in your stomach. Without the sugar or the fat, the intestines won't know you have food in the stomach. And it won't slow things down. So if you were to eat just the protein, which is actually really hard to do because there's carbs and fats everywhere, but if you were to eat just the protein, there would be no trigger to slow down stomach emptying. So you'd be hungry again fairly quickly because your stomach would empty too quickly. So you have to have all players on board to have normal functionality. So it's complete snacks, so you feel full longer. So there's this guy. So cephalic phase, he's thinking about food. So he's going to start churning, going to start secreting some gastric juices. It just looks like his stomach is sweating or crying. There's our gastric phase. Again, we're positive feedback mechanisms. We can see all the little plus signs. So we're more secreting, more churning, more mixing, hormone release like gastrin and so forth. Histamine also helps with that. We're not going to concern ourselves with that. We'll do. And then the intestinal, here we are pumping the brakes. Okay, so now we've hit the negative feedback. So we want to slow down the exiting of that chyme from the stomach so it doesn't overwhelm the rest of the digestive system. So we have these stop hormones for the stomach versus the go hormones for the stomach. So from the stomach, we hit the small intestines. This is where we're going to have the greatest amount of digestion. This is where we're going to have the greatest amount of absorption. So most of the stuff coming into the system comes in through the small intestine. Now, the length of the small intestines, again, it's small because it's diameter, not because it's length. So small intestines is actually way longer than the large intestine. The difference is small intestines is a smaller tube where the large intestine is a larger tube. So in a living person, it's going to be about 10 feet long. In a cadaver, it's 21 feet. And it's not because it grows when you die. It relaxes. So we learned back in A&P2, smooth muscle has plasticity. It doesn't have to completely relax before it starts contracting again. Unlike skeletal muscle, where if you're doing bench presses, you have to completely stretch and then completely relax to get the full range of motion and the most benefit from that muscle contraction. Smooth muscle, we don't have to do that. If we did, it would be terrifying because our intestines would have to go 10 feet, 21, 10, 21, 10, 21. We would be pulsating all the time. It'd be terrifying. We'd have to wear moo-moos. It'd be creepy. Right? So we don't have to worry about relaxing all the way. So we can keep everything nice and tight at about 10 feet. And then, of course, when you die, you can't get more relaxed to death. Okay, so it's going to completely relax, relaxing into that 21 feet length. So again, you don't want to wear hip huggers when you die because it's not going to hide you. Most of the time, loose clothing make you look better in the box. Okay. Now, this is going to provide lots and lots of surface area for digestion, for absorbing, so those important parts of bringing in the nutrients. Now, we're going to increase surface area. By increasing surface area, we don't have to be as big. We don't have to have as long of small intestines like cows or horses or something. So we're going to have those circular folds, those plica circularis. That's going to help spiral the food going through the small intestines, increasing surface area, increasing tumble time. So it helps us to absorb more. We also have villi, those finger-like extensions in the walls of the small intestines. And then each of those villi are lined in cells, and each of those cells have microvilli. So it's like shag carpeting on top of your shag carpeting on top of your shag carpeting. So lots and lots of surface area for absorbing. Now we have three different sections. We have the duodenum. Some people say duodenum. Both pronunciations are acceptable. That's about the first 10 inches. That is where everything comes into. So this is basically the mixing holding chamber coming in from everybody. So the stomach, the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas all comes into the duodenum. The rest of the system is just for the mixing and absorbing and the digesting and absorbing. We don't enter anything past this point. So then we have the jejunum, which is the next 8 feet. So this one has the most prominent plica circularis, the biggest villi. And then we have the ileum with an E instead of an I. And again, the further we get, the less and less obvious those plica circularis are becoming because we've absorbed and absorbed. We don't have as much to absorb at the end as we did at the beginning. Slightly yellow tinge to it, but most body fluids have a slightly yellow tinge to it. It is secreted amounts of 1 to 2 liters a day. Again, it depends on you, what you're eating, how often you eat, that kind of scenario. It is slightly alkaline. Everything coming into the duodenum is going to be alkaline, whether it's the intestinal juices or the liver secretions or the pancreatic secretions. And that's to counteract the acidity of the stomach. Again, that content is coming in at 1.5 to 3.5. You don't want it exiting at 1.5. That would burn a hole through things. We don't want that coming out of our anus. We want to calm things down by neutralizing all that acidity. Not only will it neutralize it to help protect the lower parts of the intestines, small and large, but by a big shift between being very acidic to being basic, that shift alone can break apart some molecular bonds that we may not be able to get at. So it's going to make it more efficient for that digestive processing. So we're going to also have water because everything we make has water in it, and then mucus so nothing gets stuck because we all have learned stuff is bad. Look at that. It's like a small intestine. So the duodenum, the jejunum, the ileum, there's that mess over there, and then emptying into the large intestines. Oh, it's like a memory of a model we've seen somewhere before, right? You start twitching. All right, so again, we've got our different parts. We've got our plica circularis with our little villi. And of course, when we look at the villi super close up, you're going to have cells that have microvilli, so wrinkles upon wrinkles upon wrinkles, all to increase surface area for better absorbing. If we're missing microvilli, if we were missing villi, we would not be able to absorb as much. So there's actually a health condition, I forget what it's called, but where some people are born without the microvilli or villi. So they have problems with absorbing nutrients, and they usually have a lot of issues with deficiencies in nutrients because they can't absorb like they're supposed to. Oh, super duper close up, and all the little microvilli all over the place. So coming into the duodenum, so enter the duodenum. Sounds like a really bad Bruce Lee movie, right? I could be voiced over and everything. If you ever want to just giggle for no reason, watch Bruce Lee movies. They're so serious, but the bad guys always dress like a pimp. Like the old school with the hat and the cane and everything. You're like, that's hilarious.
Microvilli.
Yeah, so I think there was one in Enter the Dragon. He was like a pink pimp, and then the next time you saw him, he was all in purple, and you're like, I don't know. I'm not scared of this guy. He's wearing all pink and he giggles. He's kind of. Anybody watch a Bruce Lee movie?
The Bruce Lee movie, Enter the Dragon?
Yeah.
Is that when he's going through is that the one where he goes through the levels of bosses he has to defeat? I don't know.
I want to say that's the one that has Chuck Norris as the bad guy. I know. He used to be a bad guy. And he used to be fully furred.
Yeah. He was
so if you watch like Walker, Texas Ranger, he's all smooth. That was a big joke in my family. It's like, who had to shave him this week? Because dude's built like a monkey. So lots of hair.
Yo.
There's a scene where he rips out the hair that Bruce Lee's. He's like, remember Chuck Norris? Yeah, he's like a guy, karate.
The one who can roundhouse kick closed a revolving door?
I don't know. According to all the memes, he's like everybody's afraid of Jeff's afraid of him. Everybody's afraid of him. He was a Texas Ranger back in the day. Look it up, kids. He used to be really popular. He's also short. They made all the doorways shorter so that he appeared taller in the Walker movie. Because he's like 5'5". Gotta watch out for the little people. They gotta make up for it somehow. Usually by being mean. Or right? Jean-Claude Van Damme. He's a little guy. Bruce Lee was a little guy. Anyway, interesting one. My opinions on karate movies from the 70s is not important. So what comes in from the pancreas? First one, pancreatic amylase. Again, amylase is a breaking down of sugar. So this is going to work on any polysaccharides that salivary amylase didn't get a hold of. Now we can hit it again, especially after maybe things have broken down a little bit because of the acidity of the stomach. So we'll take any of those lingering polysaccharides, break them down into dextrin and maltose, which is a disaccharide. We're going to break down proteins. We're going to have trypsin that breaks down proteins into peptides. We have chymotrypsin, which breaks down proteins to peptides. And we have elastase that breaks down proteins into peptides. Okay, a lot of protein breaking down here. Any of those peptides produced through those enzyme activities, again, are going to be hit with carboxypeptidase, which will then take the peptides and break them down into amino acids because we have to absorb them in the form of amino acids. Peptide bonds and proteins are too big to cross the membrane. So we've got a double process of breaking those guys down. Pancreatic lipase, breaking down lipids again. So it's going to, again, any triglycerides that we weren't able to get at with our lingual lipase. Also, any of those triglycerides that were emulsified, made fluffy by the liver. Now we can hit them again and break them down into fatty acids and glycerol because we have to absorb fat as fatty acids as glycerol. Then we have deoxyribonuclease, so we can break down the DNA of our dinner, and ribonuclease, so we can break down the RNA of our dinner. So whether it's lettuce or what have you, we are going to utilize everything as efficiently as possible. This is also why you just can't get rid of the pancreas. So that's the unfortunate thing when someone is diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Most of our knee-jerk reaction is cut it off, right? Get rid of the cancer. If you remove the pancreas, you starve to death because you're missing all these enzymes to process everything that we eat. So the pancreas has to stay in place no matter how bad the cancer is because you can't live without that pancreas. There's no way to replace all the enzymes that the pancreas is giving us, even with our own other enzymes that we produce. It's all necessary for proper digestion and the ability to absorb stuff coming in. So there's stuff coming in again from the pancreas, so trypsin and all those other guys to help break down the proteins. There's the chymotrypsins and fun stuff. Coming from the small intestines, your small intestines is going to handle some sugars and a little bit of protein action. So maltase is going to break down maltose. The nice thing is the sugar has the O, the enzyme has the A, so you know exactly who breaks it down because it tells you just replace the letter. That also means you have to be careful and make sure you spell things correctly, right? So maltose, again, we got from breaking down a polysaccharide into that disaccharide of maltose. We're going to break it down into glucose, blood sugar. Sucrase is going to break down sucrose, that is table sugar. I'm going to break it down into glucose and fructose. And then we have lactose, that is going to be broken down by lactase into glucose and galactose. When we look at carbohydrates, humans can only absorb 4 types of carbohydrates. We can absorb ribose, which comes from breaking down of DNA and RNA. So that's the sugar component of DNA and RNA. We can absorb glucose, we can absorb fructose, and we can absorb galactose. So those are the 4 sugars we can absorb. So it doesn't matter what your sugar started off as, it's going to be broken down into one of those 4. So again, this is why it doesn't matter if you're eating the bestest, this whole wheat pasta made by angels and clouds, or if you're drinking a Coke. They're all going to be broken down into 4 basic sugar types. So even though they talk about good carbs versus bad carbs, and high fructose corn syrup is bad for you, it has an extra hydrogen. Not a big deal. Okay. And again, we're going to break those down. Table sugar gets broken down into glucose and fructose. When you have high fructose corn syrup, it's already fructose form. So it's going to be absorbed as fructose. So those are the 4 we absorb. So again, it doesn't matter what your carb started out, even though they argue white bread is horrible, wheat bread is better. Your body absorbs these 4 regardless of the source. Okay, so eat whatever you want is what comes into your body, how you process it. Same thing with liquids, right? They're like, oh, don't drink this, drink water, it's better for you. You got to absorb water as water. It doesn't matter if that water came in milk or if that water came in Coke or if that water came in coffee. It's absorbed as water. Now, the reason why the other things are worse for you is because they come with things like calories. And unfortunately, some of those calories also have nutrients associated with them. So next time someone's all, that's a bad sugar. You're like, there's no such thing as a bad sugar. It's all absorbed the same way. Doesn't matter what it started off. Employed by dietitians to make lots of money off of the masses who don't know how to read information. Again, dietitians, they don't even have to have a biology degree. They don't even have to take biology. It's just terrifying. They're telling you what to eat, but they don't understand how your body works.
What about lectins within wheat? Do you know anything about that?
Lectins?
Yeah, lectins. Yeah.
It's just protein.
Are they harder for your body to break down than any other proteins?
As long as your enzymes are there, protein is protein. It doesn't care how it comes in. Where most people have issues, if you have someone who is actually intolerant, what's the protein that they're all whining about?
Lactose intolerant? No.
Gluten. There you go. It's like the whiny protein. So gluten-free everything has become popular lately because people are stupid. 1 to 3% of the population is sensitive to gluten. Everybody else that's on a no gluten diet is just there because they're following the leader.
So lectins would be considered a gluten?
It's slightly different.
Okay.
We're not going to go into all the breakdowns of peptide and proteins because there's like 24 amino acids. And I don't want to have to remember all 24 of those butters. You don't want to remember all 24 of those guys. But basically, we'll break down all proteins into one of those 24 and absorb them. So it doesn't matter if the protein came from steak or if the protein came from a wheat product or whatever. Everything's broken down to the absorbable.
Okay.
So there's no good, there's no bad. It's all food that we process. Might as well enjoy it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's delicioso. Peptidase breaks down peptides, dipeptides into those amino acids so we can absorb them. And in real life, I can spell amino acid. I just didn't want to. Yes, that's it. Oh, and I forgot about lactose. Okay, a lot of people who are lactose intolerant, it's not because they're allergic. You'll have people like, I'm allergic to milk. It's like, are you though? Really? If you are lactose intolerant, it's because you don't make enough lactase. Again, as an adult mammal, we don't usually supposed to have dairy in our diet. We're not supposed to be drinking milk because we've grown out of it. Now, we just keep it around because it's delicious. So what happens when you are some people who are lactose intolerant, they just don't make enough lactase. And if you don't break down lactase, that lactose as a whole sugar molecule makes it to the large intestine where the bacteria get first dibs. And you know how it is when teenagers get first dibs on the alcohol cabinet? Crazy. That's what happens here. If you don't break down the lactose for your body, the bacteria will. And when bacteria break down sugars, they get super excited and make lots of gas. So when people are lactose intolerant, it's not because they can't have the lactose. It's not because it's trying to kill them. It's because they don't make the enzyme to process it. So this is whenever you take those little lactate pills, the lactate pills give you lactose. So it breaks it down before it gets to your bacteria, and your bacteria gets super excited about first dibs on a sugar and make gas. Okay, so no one's really allergic to it. No one's really having big problems other than gassy. Yes, it could be really bad because you could be super gassy and try to blow out something, but nobody wants that. So we're not really bad about having it. We just don't make enough. And you can usually track the populations that are more lactose intolerant. They usually don't have a lot of dairy in their diet, right? So we see a lot of people from Asia may have higher rates of lactose intolerance because anybody think of fine cheeses from China or Japan?
No.
No, because their cultures, they don't eat a lot of milk after they've been weaned because they're not supposed to. It's us white people that are like, cheese on everything. Put it in the ice cream, double tap that. Milkshake, melty ice cream, delicious. We're the ones with the issues because we still have diets that have the sugar, the dairy in it that has the sugar in it. Of course, who can blame us, right? Who would want to give up ice cream?
Pepper jack cheese.
Coming in from the liver, we've got bile. So do we notice what bile ends in?
And E.
What does it not end in? Okay, don't just say the other letters of the alphabet. What does everything that we've been talking about end in?
Os or ace.
ACE, right? ACEs is an enzyme.
Nice.
This guy doesn't end in ACE, so that means it's not an enzyme. Okay, so bile doesn't actually break down anything. What bile does is it emulsifies fat. So emulsification is a chemical way to make fat fluffy. Fluffy fat. We love fluffy fat, right? I'm going to guess yes if you've ever had whipped cream and or cookies. Okay. Anybody bake?
No.
No.
All right. We are aware of people that do bake. Okay. So when you bake and you're making cookies, what do you usually do with the butter? Whip it. You cream it with the sugar. That incorporates air, that makes it very fluffy. So when you bake your cookie, it disperses evenly, making the flour very chewy. Whenever you make a pie, what do you do with the butter?
Whip it. Whip it. I don't know.
You ice it.
You ice it. Whenever you make pie dough, you want the butter as cold as possible. It's actually best to freeze the butter. And when you cut it into the dough, that's why they have the little dough choppers. You're not supposed to work it too much. Melted butter makes things chewy. Nobody wants chewy pie crust. What kind of pie crust do we usually favor?
Crunchy.
Crunchy or, that's a funny word, flaky pie crust, right? Think of apple pies, the top crust. Don't think of the bottom. That one gets soggy because of the juices. So the flakiness is because when you have the little pockets of butter that don't incorporate, that butter melts while it's cooking and it creates these little flat bubbles within. So if you want to have a flaky dessert, you're not going to melt the butter. You're to keep it as solid as possible. If you want a chewy dessert, you want to fluff it to incorporate it into the dough. So you could mess up your cookies doing that. You can put frozen butter in your cookies. Don't cream it. You'll get flaky, weird, crunchy cookies. Okay?
You also kind of get little pockets.
Yes. Still weird. I don't know. I'm a chewy cookie person. If I have a crunchy cookie, it's just I feel like I'm going to break my teeth off. Don't want to eat it all. Okay, so it's one of those things. You manipulate the fat to manipulate the textures and so forth. Now, in the case of, you also do the same thing with whipped cream. You take heavy whipping cream, which is just thick milk, and you whip it really good, and you make all the butter fat in the whipped cream, poof, and that gives you whipped cream, and then you put some sugar in it, so it's sweet whipped cream instead of just fluffy cream, right? And if you over whip it, then you get butter, and then it's kind of weird, okay? So that whipping doesn't chemically change the fat. It just makes it fluffy, making emulsified. That's what liver secretions do. That's what bile does. It makes the fat fluffy without the incorporation of air and creaming it. So when you have chunks of fat in your meal, again, the enzymes are working at it from the edges. If you don't do anything to make the fat fluffy, the enzymes can't get to it, just like if you have that frozen butter and that pie crust, there's nothing to distribute the fat within the dough. So in order for us to be able to break down the fat properly and get the enzymes working on all the parts, because again, enzymes are water soluble and lipids are not, we have to make it fluffy. And by making it fluffy, we can incorporate liquids, right? Whenever you have whipped cream, it's really easy for it to seep into your beverages, right?
Yes.
Think of frappes and stuff. Okay, so it distributes more easily. If you just put just a chunk of something on top, it's not going to be appealing, right? For the frappe or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to fluff it. That gives us more surface area for the enzymes to break it down so we can get it properly. If we don't make enough bile, you'll actually poop out solid chunks of fat. It's one of the symptoms right before you die of liver failure is to have fat, chunky poop that's gray in color because you don't have the ability to emulsify that lipid. This is also what some medications will do. So back in the day, they used to have that over-the-counter medication. I think it was called Ally. It was popular for about, a few weeks because you could get it without a doctor's note, stuff like that. And the thing was you were supposed to eat it with your meal and it would help your fat to not get absorbed by your body. So what that pill would do is stop bile from working on it, keeping it solid. And if the fat was solid, you couldn't absorb it properly. The downside, the side effect of that, if you didn't decrease the fat in your diet, because that's what most of your diet pills will tell you, is to have a low calorie, low fat diet. You're like, well, that's going to work even without the pill. Tricky buggers. But what they told you is if you take this pill to help you to not absorb a lot of fat, you're also not supposed to have a lot of fat in your diet, because if you don't absorb it, it's going to pass right through. So the side effect of those pills was greasy poop, uncontrollable explosive diarrhea of greasy poop, things that people just didn't want to experience in life. Okay, so those pills, though they worked, were not very popular because people didn't pair it with a low-fat diet. They were still eating cheeseburgers. They're like, how come it's everywhere? You're like, because you didn't absorb the fat and it's coming through straight out the other end. Disturbing. Okay, so if you don't emulsify it, you can't break it down. You can't absorb it properly. So you lost weight and pants, sometimes friends and dignity, that kind of stuff. So bile is made mostly of water, bile acids, bile salts, bile pigments, cholesterol, lectin, and some ions. It's going to have a pH of 7.6 to 6 or 8.6. Again, everything coming in, whether it's from the pancreas or the liver or the small intestines, everything's coming in at a slightly alkaline pH to counteract the acidity coming from the stomach. And again, it emulsifies, it fluffies the fat to increase surface area. But since it doesn't break it down, when you emulsify butter, it's still butter. When now it's just whipped butter, easier to spread. When you emulsify milk, it's still milk. It's just whipped cream and delicious. It doesn't break down anything chemically, so it's not an enzyme. It doesn't end in ACE. So here we have the liver and gallbladder's contribution again. And of course, as that hits, it makes the fat fluffy so that pancreatic lipase can hit the fat and then start breaking it down more efficiently. So hormones from the small intestine. Our first one again is secretin. It is going to work on the stomach to inhibit gastric gland secretion. That's its main gig for the stomach. To a lesser extent, it does reduce gastric motility, just not as strongly as the secretion suppression. It also goes to the pancreas to say, hey, make pancreatic juice that's filled with those digestive enzymes, that is filled with those bicarbonate ions to help neutralize the acidity coming from the stomach. It is going to work with CCK. So secretin and CCK kind of amplify each other. So they're kind of like those kids that you can't put together because then they're crazy. So they're going to help each other do their job. It also goes to the liver and say increase bile output. So not only is it slowing the stomach activity, it's going to make sure those enzymes and bile is present so we can break down the food coming from the stomach. CCK, our cholecystokinase, stimulates the contraction of the gallbladder, increasing bile. Okay, so both of them increase bile. They just have different targets. One targets the liver, one targets the gallbladder. It's also going to stimulate the secretion again of those pancreatic juices rich in digestive enzymes and bicarbonate ions. Now, if you get your gallbladder removed, you don't have a gallbladder, there's no target for CCK. So after gallbladder removal, CCK will no longer work to increase bile output because there's no target for it. The only bile output increaser would be secretin. Now, of course, unfortunately, after you remove your bile, there's nowhere to, or remove your gallbladder, there's nowhere to store your bile after that point because it's basically the purse for the liver. So you constantly release bile in small amounts, but you can't release large loads during digestion. Again, this is why people who have had gallbladder surgery sometimes have to change their diet. There's usually a lot of complaint about fatty foods and not being able to process fatty foods properly. You get greasy poop because you don't have the bile on hand necessary to fluff the fat to absorb it properly. So it will, for some people, drastically have to change how you eat so you don't have awkwardness in the digestive department later down the road. Now, gastric inhibitory peptide, again, our notorious GIP, goes to the stomach, reducing gastric gland secretion and gastric motility towards the end of gastric phase into the intestinal phase, slowing everything down. It is going to stimulate the release of insulin from the pancreas. So CCK and secretin work on the exocrine function, the digestive juice function of the pancreas, where GIP works on the endocrine function, the hormone production. Again, this is how we start storing sugar. So as soon as we start absorbing sugar from the small intestines, that's going to trigger the release of GIP. That will tell the pancreas to release insulin. So we start storing sugar. So again, you shouldn't have a sugar high or a sugar low because the hormones are going to tag team at the proper time. So it doesn't matter if you eat a candy bar or if you eat, a bowl full of sugar, because I don't know what, maybe it's a slow weekend. You're not going to get that sugar high because the pancreas is going to release insulin almost instantly. And again, that's a good thing, because if the pancreas didn't do this thing, it's not the candy bar that would kill you. It'd be the bread or the pasta, because of all the carbs that are in those breads and pastas. Okay, so if your pancreas isn't responding properly, then we get sugar highs and problems. And this is what they check for when they check to see if you have diabetes, right? They give you the nasty sugar drink. They come back in an hour. Your blood glucose level should still be within the normal range. That's given time for the pancreas to release insulin in your body to store the sugars. If your sugars are really high, that could be an indicator that we're not responding to insulin, or we don't have enough insulin to do the job that we've done. And then our last chance to process and absorb nutrients is going to come in the large intestine. So last stage of digestion is going to occur through the colon, and that digestion is through the activity of bacteria. Again, it's just like you might harvest milk from your cow or eggs from your chicken. You're not eating the grass directly. You're not eating the chicken feed directly. They are, but you're getting a product. That's what we're going to do. We have these little bacteria that's going to ferment and break down anything we didn't get to chance to break down so we can harvest from them. And this is why we've got the tinea coli, that muscle that tenses the colon. And as it tenses the colon, it creates those little bubbles, those little hostra. Those little bubbles act as little mini fermenting chambers. So the bacteria can hang out and not get flushed down the drain so quickly. So they can sit there and do their job in these nice little cozy rooms that you make for them. So chyme is prepared for elimination by the action of bacteria. So again, it's food on your plate, bolus in your mouth, chyme in your stomach, chyme in your small intestine. Large intestine is when the chyme becomes feces and then it's out of the body. So the bacteria are going to be breaking down any carbs they can get a hold of, causing fermentation. And when you ferment things, you do produce carbon dioxide, you do produce gases. So the more carbs you have in your diet, the more gassy you are going to be. So they're going to release hydrogens, carbon dioxide, and methane. So again, carbon dioxide, that's a big gas that we all have to deal with. Methane gives you the smell, which is why Hereford smells the way it does, is because they got a lot of plant eaters that are hanging out around there, right? Yeah, we're not talking about the vegans. No, they would probably be all gassy too. We're talking about those cows producing those methanes. Hydrogen is actually the most flammable component of flatulence. So whenever you've watched those videos, if you've watched them where people are setting their farts on fire, the reason why they're flammable is because of the hydrogen. It has a smaller flash point or a lower flash point, and the hydrogen will ignite the methane that will cause the big burst of flame. So if you slow down the video, you'll actually see blue rush first. That blue is the hydrogen igniting, and it will ignite the methane, which is the big orange flash that you see, in case you want to break down the stages of fart bubbles when you explode them. So those are the two big ones that cause those issues. Now, gas is going to, again, give us flatulence, and we make about 500 milliliters daily. So everybody makes gas as long as you have sugar, and we all have sugar in our diet at some point. Most of the time, we release it while we're sleeping, which may make you feel better about yourself or more paranoid about life if you sleep with other people. You're sharing a whole bunch of gas when that happens. Now, the bacteria not only are going to work on our proteins, or not going to work on just our carbs, but they're also going to work on our proteins. So any proteins we weren't able to break down, they can break some of those down into those amino acids and we can absorb. When they break down the proteins, that gives us fecal odor. Okay, so gas comes from carbs, smell comes from protein, which is why people, when they're on that high protein diet, low carb diet, keto, whatever, their smells change. Their urine becomes more urine-y smelling because of the protein component. Their poop becomes stinkier because the bacteria are processing the proteins more than the carbs. So now you know who to blame for each one of those things. So gas is carbs, smell is protein. This is why if you've ever had babies, especially newborn babies, the first week, the poop is the most terrifying poop you'll ever see, but it doesn't smell bad. And that's because babies don't have bacteria yet. And that's why the poop looks so weird. It's because, one, they're cleaning out whatever they've been floating around in for a while. But two, they have to have bacteria to establish to fully break down nutrients. So until the bacteria come into play, you're not going to have the smells, you're not going to have the gases that you would have otherwise. Okay, so even though it's scary the first week, it's actually the least stinky of the poop ever because the bacteria hasn't shown up. Once it's there, you'll know it's there. It's like, oh, you've established your colonies already. Good job. And then the smells happen. Bacteria also decompose bilirubin. So we talked about that way back when we had the recycling of our blood. So once we get bilirubin out through the glucuronic acid from the bile, the stercobilins and urobilins are going to be processed, giving us our color of brown. So again, this is why doctors and nurses want to know what color it is, what frequency, what's coming with it, because they want to know, one, if your poop has very little smell, you don't have a lot of protein either in your diet or the bacteria aren't processing protein properly. If you have extra gas, you either have too much sugar in your diet or they're processing sugars at high rates. And of course, the color is going to indicate if they're breaking down that bilirubin or are you getting the bilirubin out for it to break down. So your poop activities can all play into your overall health and determine, do you need a fecal transplant in case you don't have the right bacteria? That happens a lot, especially after a lot of antibiotics. That's why a lot of times if you're on antibiotics too long, you get diarrhea. You kill off all bacteria, not just the one trying to hurt you, but also the guts bacteria. So once those guys die off, it affects your digestion properties. And of course, we get the diarrhea because we can't process food like we're supposed to. So if it's really severe, you've been sick a long time, you may have to get a fecal transplant. Of course, they have the suppository route where you just drop off the kids and hope for the best. And you can have the swallow route, which on the outside, don't worry, it's clean. It's not like you're just eating poop or anything like that. Though that's what a lot of animals do to get the bacteria they need. So if you've ever watched dogs, cats, everything, they'll eat poop. And you're like, ew, why? They're getting back some of those bacteria they may have lost. So they tend to do it, especially if they've been sick. Because they're trying to bring back some of the things. Disturbing, isn't it? Bunnies are notorious. Beware of bunnies. So we're going to keep these little guys around because, again, we can get lots of vitamins like B and K from bacterial processing. So if you don't have the right bacteria, we can end up with anemia issues. We can end up with clotting disorders because without vitamin K, we can't clot properly. Without some of our vitamin Bs, we can't make blood properly. So again, when you have blood disorders, they'll check your fecal stuff, see what's going on, to see if there's a relationship there. So a lot of stuff we're being brought in because the bacteria is able to process for us. Oh, look at that. It's like a large intestine. So of course, we've got our different parts, and each little bubble is a hostra, and then you've got the tinea coli down the middle that's going to tighten, forming the hostra, just like pulling on the cords of your hoodie makes all the little wrinkles in your hoodie top. So the large intestine is about 5 feet long with 3 different sections. Again, it's going to have those little pouches called hostra. That is plural. Hostrum is a single pouch created by the tinea coli, the tensing of the colon muscles, with all kinds of fun things with the A's and the E's. So let's put them all in there. So again, we start off with the cecum. For us, it's a very small, blind little pocket. In herbivores, it is huge. In koala, it's really, really big. In a lot of your cows and stuff, it's really big because that's a fermenting chamber. Ours is pretty small, so we're not known for our fermenting. Again, based on our teeth, based on the length of our small intestine, based on the length of our large intestine, we are not made to eat just plants, and we are not made to eat just meat. Our system is too long for just meat because meat sits and rots, because we don't want that to happen. And we're too short for fermentation to get the nutrients out of plants. So we're supposed to eat any and everything that doesn't move fast enough based on our digestive system. So we have a very small cecum because we're not supposed to have that much plants in our diet. The colon, again, ascending going up, then transverse goes across, descending goes down, and sigmoid makes an S, lining up with the rectum. Dang near killed them. And again, rectum means up and down, like rectus means up and down. So the last 15 centimeters or 6 inches. Now there it is again. Okay, so going up, side, down, see. Little cecum. Okay, so here's our ileocecal valve coming into the cecum, entrance into the large intestine. We're not giving you an actual picture over here. You're welcome. But again, we've got the rectum with our anal canals, which I always find it funny because they're spelled the same but are pronounced different. It's not anal canal. It's anal canal. So those are going to give us little patches that allow for expansion and contraction. So the fecal matter can sit here, and as we absorb the nutrients, as we absorb the water, we just compact it, make it smaller and smaller until it goes out. If we don't absorb enough water, then it's very liquid. And of course, we have our internal anal sphincter, that is smooth muscle, and our external anal sphincter, that is skeletal muscle that you have control over, or so we hope. Got a line in mucus producing cells. Again, from mouth to anus, every part is going to produce mucus, so nothing gets stuck, because again, stuck is bad. Even though we make mucus, we do not produce any enzymes. So as we learned, the esophagus and the large intestine are the only two parts of the alimentary canal that does not produce digestive enzymes. Now, unlike the esophagus, the large intestine does absorb nutrients. So that makes it a little bit different because stuff can still come in. So by the time chyme has remained in the large intestines, the trip takes about 3 to 10 hours from beginning to end. It has become that solid, semi-solid fecal material ready to exit the body. So we're absorbing electrolytes, including sodium, potassium, chloride, vitamins, all that kind of fun. Clinical consideration, pretty much we only care about it if it's acting up in public. And of course, we've all seen medication and pill drug commercials about this stuff. So diarrhea, defecation of liquid fecal matter, we don't absorb enough. This can be because of something irritating the intestinal lining and forcing that fluid out faster than we can absorb things. So again, we see this a lot with viruses, and we get the stomach flu and it just irritates everybody from beginning to ends. Of course, you can have amoebic dysentery. Dysentery is just diarrhea till you die. Unfortunate. So nowadays, of course, they've got antibiotics and fluid IVs to help you out. But back in the day, they used to give you a cot with a hole in a bucket, and they would just park you over that hole, and you would poop until you died. The latter stages, you would be defecating what was called rice water diarrhea, which was just basically kind of a brown colored water. And you would die from dehydration. Because if you lose the 9 liters without reabsorbing it daily, you're going to have a lot of problems. Constipation, opposite of diarrhea. So we're not pooping like we should. So infrequent or difficult defecation. Again, could be caused by issues, could be caused by over-absorbing of fluids, stuff getting stuck. That's the name. Hemorrhoids. So there's a lot of big veins associated with the anal canal. Hemorrhoids are basically varicose veins, but of the anal canal. And if they get too big, they can sag into the anal column, which means if you defecate, you can push on one and cause a rupture. So you may have a lot of bleeding during pooping episodes. They can actually sag so much that they sag out of the anus so they're visible. That's where you would use preparation H, because preparation H has a vasoconstrictor, so them back right up where they need to go. This is why they tell you don't strain or push too hard, because you could blow out one of these blood vessels if the pressure's too much. So here's showing you those veins, and they are just called hemorrhoidal veins because they're notorious for causing hemorrhoids up in there. Questions about mouth to anus? All right, moving on to the accessory organs. So we've got our pancreas. So it does secrete pancreatic juice. We're not going to talk about it again because we already talked about it. But that exocrine function is about 1 quart a day. And of course, it's going to be alkaline to counteract the acidity of stomach contents. The endocrine function should look a little familiar. We talked about this back on test 1. Remember test 1? We had hopes and dreams. So we have, again, those islets of Langerhans or pancreatic islets that only make up 1% of the pancreatic cells, making either our insulin or glucagon. So again, insulin produced by beta cells. When we release GIP, when the presence of sugar coming into the system comes into play, insulin will be released so we can store that sugar so we don't get that sugar high. So lowering glucose levels in the blood. If it's been about 4 hours since our meal, our sugar levels start to drop. So we then are going to release glucagon from the alpha cells. That's going to release stored sugar from the liver and from the body cells to increase blood glucose. So they should tag team about every 4 hours or after a meal. So we can keep the right level of sugars. So there's our pancreas, which we know all about. And here's our exocrine cells and our little islands of hormone producing stuff that's going to produce the insulin and the glucagon. Okay. The liver, which looks very huge when you just have a rib cage in the liver. Again, the liver is the largest visceral organ that we have. There it is from the front side. Oh, there it is again, just slice it through. All right, so our largest visceral organs. Now, when we look at the liver does a whole lot of stuff. It's kind of like if someone goes, what do you do with your life? And you say student. I'm pretty sure you say more than student, right? You probably say things like a parent or a sibling or a child, or I work here, I volunteer. You probably do a lot more than just coming to class. Sad, but true, right? I'm not everything for you. So same thing with the liver. Most people think of the liver and it's get rid of your weekend, okay? That's just a small fraction about what it does. It does a whole lot more than that. So our body is basically, or your liver is basically your body's little mad chemist. It can do a lot of different chemistry to get us the nutrients that we need to function. So one of the things it's going to do, again, is to work with carbohydrate metabolism. So it can store sugar. So it's going to take glucose and convert it into glycogen, which is the stored form of animal sugar. So glycogenesis, again, Genesis means the making of, like the first book of the Bible is Genesis, the making of everything. So this is glucose anabolism, building up. We can do glycogenolysis, lysis meaning breaking down. So of course, if we drop low on our sugar, we can take that stored glycogen, convert it back into glucose, releasing it into the blood, bringing sugar levels back up. So this would be our sugar breakdown, catabolism. And if we don't store enough sugar, we don't have enough sugar in our diet, we can make some. So gluconeogenesis, again, gluco is sugar, neo is new, and genesis, the production of. So taking a few amino acids, some lactic acid, turning it into glucose so we can get the sugar that we need. Again, this is the big push or the reason why, the keto diet works. It makes the liver convert some of your stored proteins or some of your fats into sugar, because you have to have sugar in order to work. And whenever you're burning lots of fat to make sugar, you get really wasteful with it, just like making fried chicken, right? It's so much messier than just ordering KFC. Okay, so we make a lot of waste, and that in turn causes us to lose a lot of weight. If the liver's not up to it, they can't deal with all the waste, and you have liver problems with that. So, and you don't want to be an alcoholic going onto the keto diet. You're just asking them to do that. Lipid metabolism, again, chemistry. Liver stores some triglycerides, breaks them down into fatty acids, which we can convert into acetyl coenzyme A. Acetyl coenzyme A, we can make all kinds of stuff out of it. It's just like a little 2-square Lego. You can make the Batmobile, you can make a double-decker couch, whatever you want. So if we get to that acetyl coenzyme A, we can build a lot of sugars or proteins or fats out of that, or we can use it for energy. If we get too much, we convert that into a keto body that we get rid of, and that's where ketosis comes from. That's where the keto diet comes from. They're measuring those keto bodies that are produced when we're breaking down large volumes of fats, hopefully to turn it into something like sugar. We can synthesize lipoproteins. We can synthesize cholesterol. So even though a lot of people think cholesterol is bad, it is going to be a big player in our cell membranes. It's a big player in a lot of your steroid hormones. So if you don't have cholesterol, there's a lot of hormones you can't make. Your cell bodies won't be stable. They'll rupture. So we do have to have it. It's just too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. And I guess we'll stall with protein metabolism. Oh, I was too excited about something. We didn't make it today. Let's go to lab. Oh, have a quiz about some of this stuff. I know you just can't get away. Oh, do you need the light? Or?
No, it's okay. I got it. Thank you.
This is your return. Was that on my This 1,000 fun. The 199.
Everybody got the answers?
No.
I have a picture.
You have a picture? Here, man, you have it.
I took it up close too.
It better be.
Okay. So we're good? Two of us?
Yes, thank you.
Microsoft Teams. I have the content downloaded. I just need the address.